But I'd like to begin by recognizing that I'm speaking today from the traditional territory of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh First Nations, and there may be people from all over British Columbia on the session today. We also acknowledge the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territories of all First Nations on which we gratefully work and gather. So we're talking about aging today, and we all are. It's inevitable, and it always has been. But today we also know that overall Canada's population is aging too, and that now it's comprised of more older people than in previous generations. In fact, over 18% of Canadians are 65 or older, and by 2054, the number will increase to more than 20%. And in some parts of Canada, the proportion of older residents is much higher. For example, on Vancouver Island, 25% overall of residents are seniors. And in some communities, the numbers are even much higher. For example, Qualicum Beach has the highest proportion in Canada, with 52.1% of the population being over 65. And nearby Parksville ranks third with 42.4%. I'm in Horseshoe Bay, and I know that here in West Vancouver, the proportion is over 28% and growing. So it's something that we should all be paying attention to, but also local governments and organizations and provincial and federal governments are paying attention to very much as well. We also know that for those of us who are 65, men can now expect to live another 19 and a half years. And for women, that increases to over 22 years past the age of 65. And as we think about the time still ahead of us, while there are many unknowns, of course, one thing that most of us want as we grow older is to remain in our own homes and communities as we age. In fact, numerous surveys have shown pretty consistently that over 90% of us want to age in place. And, you know, if we think about the alternative to aging in place, it's typically moving into a care facility or moving in with a family member. But even knowing that as we age, we're likely to require some supports and changes to our living situation, most people still prefer to remain in their own homes and for many reasons. And not necessarily just their own homes, but living independently, so in their own communities. Having the independence, the privacy, community, and surroundings that we're accustomed to is important for most of us. And this also supports physical and mental health by helping us to maintain social connections and providing stability and control over our environment. And that includes the fact that in many care facilities, it's much harder to control germs and influenza and other problems, so that being in your own home is usually the safer option. And it can cost considerably less also than the fees charged in care facilities when you stay in your own home, resulting in savings for both individuals and especially for governments. Are there other reasons why people prefer to age in place? Go ahead and if you can think of any that I haven't mentioned, please write them in the chat box. So for many people, or for some people, things might happen that could prevent them from remaining in their home, such as loss of mobility, financial problems, or health challenges. Even so, the effects of some of these situations can be minimized by planning ahead to age in place. But many people don't think much about this, much less develop a plan that can guide them into their later years. And if I had thought I had to do a poll or could see all of you, I would say, you know, put your hands up if you have thought about it and if you are doing something about it. But maybe we can talk about that later in the Q&A. So because many people don't think much about this, much less actually develop a plan that can guide them into their later years, it can be a real challenge as it creeps up on you, or if something happens unexpectedly that suddenly causes you to get it together and do some planning or make some significant changes. And, you know, the reason a lot of people don't do anything until something happens, or they see something happening to a friend or a family member, it's often because people tend to focus mostly on the present. Other people, they're just too busy and they don't really see it as a priority, or they might be just disorganized. There are also those who are in denial about aging and, you know, don't see age as any kind of a barrier. And the concept of needing to plan for aging in place is something that they're also in denial about. Similarly, pride, or the idea that they won't need help or experience any changes as they age, may be a factor for some. Stigma around age and the ageism prevalent in society can also be a factor. When aging is viewed negatively, it must be avoided at all costs, or so some of us think, and we think we can do something about that. But for some people, also typically those who are less educated or have lower incomes or are marginalized in various ways, it can be very difficult to plan ahead or to feel that you have any kind of control over what happens in your life. If you can think of some other challenges or barriers, please write them in the chat box. I'm going to take a quick look there because I see that there have been some. Tanya says we spend a lifetime building networks, mechanics, pools, shopping, doctors, and it's harder to rebuild these connections in our 60s. My place is physically going to be too tough to live in. Just getting to my vehicle with gear is becoming difficult. I know that feeling. Judy's been in her house for 51 years and doesn't want to leave. I also completely understand that. Carolyn says her 83-year-old mother wants to age in place in Qualicum because she does have a good support system. And speaking of Qualicum, you know, where there is such a high proportion of older people in the community, they've had to develop good networks and systems and supports and programs and facilities for older people. And we hope that other local governments are recognizing that it's an aging population in their community is going to experience the need for more of those kinds of supports as well. So we know that making plans and decisions today will help better prepare you for tomorrow. At least most of us cognitively know that. But regardless, we often rationalize and some of those barriers kick in. But knowing that planning is important, and thinking about your future well-being in areas such as health, housing, finances, transportation, and social connections really will give you greater control over your independence, your quality of life, and your dignity as you age. And governments know this too. So in 2015, the BC government developed a guide called Building My Healthy Future. And shortly after, the federal government, taking a look at that, thought it was a good idea, and so adapted it to create another document, the Thinking About Your Future, Plan Now to Age in Place checklist. And that's still available on the federal government website. You can just Google it, or it's under the Employment and Social Development Canada department. But it's a good tool, but it's a PDF. You can look at it online, or you can actually download it, print it off, and use it as a checklist. But more recently, that checklist has been updated and expanded through a partnership between the Aga Khan Council for Canada and United Way BC, and has just launched the online Aging in Place Toolkit several months ago. So that's actually a website that takes an updated checklist that's been adapted, in this case specifically for the Amaanali community, and made completely up to date and expanded with more resources, so that it's a very convenient online tool that you can use and little bits at a time, or go through the whole thing. And we often say that just-in-time learning is the best, because, you know, if there's something about your finances that you need to think ahead to, you're planning to meet your investment advisor, then you can go and look at the resources in this area. So this is what it looks like. And we're actually going to, in a few minutes, go to the actual tool live and take a look at it. And now I'm not sure, I don't think that Aman is with us yet.
He's here. He's
here.
He
is here. Okay, well, if he is here, that's wonderful. You made it in just in time. And so I'm going to turn it over to Aman. So I will stop my screen sharing. And Aman will start sharing, and he's going to take you on a tour and tell you more about the Aging in Place Toolkit.
Okay, great. Thanks very much, Barb, and good afternoon, everyone. It's really nice to be here with you. It's our hope that you're warm and dry wherever you're in from. And in a couple of minutes, I'll tell you why Barb, maybe she did already, but I'll tell you why Barb was a little confused as to whether or not I was online, which actually, if you look at it timing-wise, is actually quite coincidental. But I'll get into that in a moment. But you know, I know not everyone has their cameras on, and so those of you that have your cameras on, or those of you who know how to use the raise a hand function in Zoom, or know how to use the reaction, I'm just going to ask a couple of questions here and hope that you'll respond again in any one of those ways, just for us to get a sense, or at least start some thinking. So number one, I think we may see a lot of hands up here, but how many of you that are on the call today are retired? Yeah, okay, I see a lot of hands, excellent. And those of you that are retired, how many put together a financial plan before you decided to retire? Okay, I see some hands continuing to be up, excellent. Now I'm going to switch this a little bit. So a lot of you have thought about the financial aspect of retiring and aging, but let's think a little bit about where we live and actually what we've gone through here in British Columbia over the last week. How many of you have an emergency kit that you can grab and go from home? I see some physical hands on camera as well as raised hands. Excellent. And last question, you know, we've seen over the next kind of 48 hours or so, we're expecting some heavy rainfall, granted not as heavy as last week, but in the event that where you are or at your home, there is any flooding or damage, how many of you know what municipal resources are available in your area and where you can go? Excellent. Good. Great job. Thanks for all those who participated. And really what this was is to really ask some questions to get all of us thinking about what it means, not only to age in place, but the importance of having a plan. And you know, Barb's already mentioned where the Aging in Place Toolkit originated and the pilot that we ran with the Smiley community, and what that meant for that community and the types of questions that we asked. You know, you'll shortly see again. I'll go through a demo, but what I'll also be able to show you in the next few minutes is what the reaction was of those who actually went through the toolkit, and why some of the questions that we ask in the toolkit, as well as, you know, I've asked today, actually trigger some thought. Many of you put your hands up for all or most of the questions that I asked, which is excellent. But as I'm sure many of you can appreciate, and as we learned in this pilot, not everybody has a good plan in place. And the intent of the tool, be it the original checklist, which I've posted a link to in the chat, or this adapted digital toolkit, really it's to help those of us who are aging, who wish to age in place, to develop a plan for ourselves over the next 15, or I guess 10, 15, or 20 years. And so, you know, a common misconception when we look at this tool is it's for seniors who are, you know, in their, or older adults who are 60, 70, perhaps 80 years old. And actually, it's a tool that's meant for those who are much younger than that, to plan for when they do turn 60, 65, 70, or 75. And so that's something that we learned going through this tool. And when we talk about planning, you know, the reason I wanted to bring up my circumstance was that, you know, we all know the importance of having a long-term plan, at least those of you that raised your hands, but even a short-term plan. So, you know, it's not windy or rainy where I am in Westminster, but I guess a truck hit a power pole outside of my house about 25 minutes before the start time of this webinar. And so in a scurry, I had to find somewhere to situate myself. But what was my backup plan? Well, Barb had a copy of my slides and graciously was able to cover for me. And and we were able to be in touch and communicate over text instead of me showing up at 4:02 saying, "Don't worry, Barb, I'm here now." So short-term plans and long-term plans are all very important, be it in our day-to-day lives or when we age in place, as is the topic for our webinar this afternoon. So Barb's given a little bit of history, and so I'm going to talk to you a little more about the actual toolkit that we developed. This toolkit takes on 9 areas of self-assessment. And so really it provides those who are going through this an opportunity to do a little bit of self-reflection. Now, the beauty of a toolkit like this is that while there is a lot of value in going through this exercise on your own to do some internal reflection, it's also a very handy toolkit to be doing with your family members or your spouse or your friends or your loved ones. And so this isn't just a toolkit for Aman or for Barb or for Lorna or for Angela or for Roberta. This is a toolkit for everybody, and it can again be something that you do as a family. Sometimes grandchildren can help their grandparents go through this toolkit, or a son or daughter could help their mother or father go through it, or a niece or nephew can help their aunt or uncle. The idea is to start having these conversations so that as you age and as you age in place, you can take the appropriate steps to make sure that you're not only comfortable but safe. And so the 9 areas of self-assessment that the tool look at are my health, my home, my transportation, my finances, my connections, my safety, my supports and services, my community, and where applicable, my partner and me. The important thing to recognize, and I intentionally ordered the questions at the beginning the way that I did, because so many times when we think about our plan for when we age, many of us default to retirement or default to having a financial plan. And that's certainly one aspect of it, but it's not the only aspect. We have to think about what happens when we can't drive, or what happens when perhaps our home has stairs, but we can't climb stairs anymore, or what happens is having a bathroom but no shower on the ground floor of our homes practical. Or do we need to start looking at perhaps making enhancements to where we live, or finding a new home early on, so that we're not taking on mortgages as we age. And so again, one of the core purposes of the tool is to really think about our entire lives and all the aspects of it, to start planning and start asking the questions that otherwise maybe we'd be uncomfortable thinking about. Nobody wants to think about, do I have a plan if my spouse passes away? Or do I have a plan if my friends or my close connections move away? I forget who it was, but there's a comment in the chat about, building these new connections in your 60s. And that, of course, is very challenging. And so this tool actually asks the questions. And more than asking the questions, actually, it's hopeful that it prompts you to start thinking about what steps you need to take now. The other really great part about having this tool digitally is that it allows us to integrate all of the resources that are available from the provincial and or federal governments to support. So for example, when we look at my safety, and again, I'll show you the toolkit live shortly, but when we look at my safety, we look at enhancements that need to be made at home, and also what financial support is available from the government to make those enhancements, or what some organizations are that can support in making those enhancements to at least assess what needs to be done and whether or not it is indeed safe to continue living in that home. So the important things to take away here, number one, planning for your future. While financially is important, there's much more to it. than simply finances. And number two is that whether you're doing the toolkit alone, with a partner, or with a loved one, recognize that as uncomfortable some of these conversations may be, they're very important ones. And so having them early, again, is important to make sure that you have everything you need and your loved ones have the information that they need to help make decisions and help support you in some of those decisions. So I'm going to, as part of the toolkit, again, that was published on a website, we developed 9 very short clips for each of those areas of self-assessment that you just saw, to help better explain what you need to be considering or what to consider in those specific functional areas. And so I'm going to play a short clip for you that outlines the section around my community, just to give you a little bit of a flavor, and then we'll go into the tool itself. I'll just make sure that my sound is sharing.
Not hearing the sound, Aman.
Oh, thanks for that, Barb. One moment.
Community. Community means more than just the neighborhood in which you reside. It includes those with whom you share a faith, a common identity, and similar interests. It's a place where you can find a sense of belonging with others. Whether you're thinking about joining a book club, participating in bingo at a local community center, or volunteering with your local church, mosque, or synagogue, a sense of community will help you find purpose in your later years. It brings you closer together to the people who matter most to you, and can be a source of personal joy and contribute to better overall mental health. Finding your community is an essential component of a successful plan to age in place. Plan today for the life you want to live tomorrow.
Okay, so again, a small snippet to show one of the functional areas, and also, when we think about community, how many other components just to community there are. So, this toolkit or this checklist, when done right, again, requires a lot of reflection, but can actually be a very valuable exercise, and can take 15, 20, 30 minutes, even per section, as you really dig deep into understanding what it takes to be prepared in some of those areas. And so I'm going to spend a few minutes here taking you to the tool itself, and giving you a little bit of a demo of the types of questions that you see there, and how easy it is to actually fill out the tool. Okay. So you should now see it. The image, I'm sure, is familiar to all because it was on Barb's slide. But we start when you land on the toolkit, explaining the importance, and this is exactly what Barb was talking about in terms of Canadians now living longer now than ever before, and why it is indeed so important to have that plan in place for the life that you want to live tomorrow. And we talk about the importance of the toolkit. There also is, we recognize that some families may have comfort in printing this off and completing the checklist offline, and having that available. And so there is a PDF version. But the beauty of us being able to do this online is we have this interactive form that allows it to become very simple to fill it out, but also links to the resources that you need, which we feel is a great value add in this versus doing a PDF or a hard copy version that you print off. Is you can't have the resources literally at your fingertips. So we go to start checklist here. There's some further instructions, but really what it's telling you is you can go through section by section. So if you want to say, do this with a family member and do only health or only home, you can do that. You can navigate the one particular section and fill out only those pieces, or you can go through it in order. We do recommend that. I mean, ideally, all of us have a robust, holistic aging in place plan, and so naturally that would mean doing all of the sections. But we also know that certain aspects maybe are more important or perhaps more timely for some, and so that is why we wanted to make sure that you could navigate section by section. So for the sake of this demonstration, let's look at my safety. So we come to the My Safety page. We have the overview video, which again, very similar to the one that you would have seen before. There's some prompts on what exactly to be thinking about in terms of protecting yourself. And again, very simple for us to be filling this out. You would answer yes or no to the question, I feel safe in my home, neighborhood, and community, and know where to report concerns and how to make my community safer. So if I say yes, I can move along to the next question. If I say no, automatically a resource pops up for me from the Government of Canada that is the Safe Living Guide, which is a guide to home safety for seniors. And I could click to learn more and have that resource available to me right away without losing my spot on the checklist. Similarly, we could go through all of the questions. I won't bore you by reading them all out, and you can see them all. But you know, some key ones that I'll highlight here. I understand the risk of falls as I age and know what to do to decrease this risk. So again, if you say yes, great. If you say no, there are resources that pop up that help you from the Government of Canada, so you can prevent falls, as well as an article here on falls in seniors that actually talks through key strategies, what you can do in your home, and some other relevant statistics. So again, I've said it before, but at the tip of your fingers, you can have the relevant resources that you need based on how you're responding to this toolkit. And we keep going. And we can either go to the next section or save our progress and return later. The other piece that I feel is an important part of this tool, because we've talked about how important this is as an exercise in reflection and planning. This doesn't just end at asking you the questions and giving you resources. It actually forces you to now, well, I shouldn't say force because it's not required, but it's an important step. It's number one, to give a little bit of reflection. Naturally, some of these questions will probably cause you or your loved ones to actually stop and think like, hey, I've never actually thought about having an emergency kit, or I've never actually thought about what we would need to do at home to prevent falls, and so on and so forth. And so this reflection page actually gives you an opportunity to think about, you know, what have these questions actually prompted you to think about? You know, as you've gone through my health, is there anything that I need to do now based on what I've been asked to set particular goals on my health, to say eat better or do more physical activity for exercise? Perhaps my home, perhaps again, none of us have thought about preparing the home for a fall. So maybe the my home section caused us to think about, you know, perhaps I need to look at installing an extra railing. And again, this goes on to each of the sections. And lastly, oh, and I see your hand up. Is there?
Sorry, Aman. There is a question from Sandra. She wants to know if this site is going to be kept current.
Yeah, great question. So yes, you know, we are still wrapping up our pilot. Once the pilot is completed and our findings have been reported, we will continue to load resources on. So what we have right now is, I mean, what's there is great, and it's fully loaded. But as resources update as new ones come out. As we come across new ones, they will be loaded into the resource library and linked back to the relevant questions.
Thank you.
Thanks, Anna. So the last piece of this is an action plan. And again, the hope is that in addition to reflection, this actually causes all of us to act. And we look at it in two phases. We look at actions now, so now being kind of this 3 to 6 month range. Perhaps it's looking into particular vendors. Perhaps it's joining a book club, as we heard in the video. Perhaps it's looking for organizations to volunteer with. And then we look at actions I will take in the future. And actions I will take in the future is more meant to be your opportunity to plan, say, 1 year down the road or 2 years down the road, 5, 10, 20, 15, 20, 25 years down the road. But again, this acts as a goal sheet for all of us to be thinking through what it is that we need to have in place and how we're going to use some of the resources that we've now been exposed to. And then we would lastly end up with a spit out of the results from our survey and a list of the relevant resources. You can have that emailed to you to revisit later on. That's the survey piece of it, or I shouldn't say survey, but the checklist piece of it in a nutshell that you can go through again when you start the form. And by the way, the form is completely confidential. This is all. We don't collect any, your name or anything that would be associated with you. There is an ask about your age range, but again, that's more meant for us to better understand who is taking or who is going through the toolkit. But this is completely confidential because we recognize some of the questions that are asked here are sensitive. But this toolkit asks you: are you doing it for yourself? Are you doing it for a family member? Are you doing it for someone that you give care to? So this, as you complete it, you're asked some of these questions, and again, it allows you to now start that reflection as an individual or for a loved one. So the other piece of this, as you're going through the checklist, as I showed you, when you say no to a particular point, relevant resources would come up. We also have the resources available in a library. The question was asked, is this going to be kept up to date? I responded yes. And more so, what we're going to be able to do over time is expand this, be region-centric or province-centric as well. Right now, most of the resources, if not all of them, are federal resources available to all Canadians. But as we grow this library, we'll be able to filter by location. We'll be able to filter by British Columbia, by Alberta, by Saskatchewan, by Ontario, et cetera, et cetera. And also you can filter through by the area of your life or those 9 areas of self-reflection. So again, my community, my connections, my finances. So if I came to this page and either hadn't taken the checklist yet or gone through the toolkit quite yet, or was coming back to revisit and wanted to make sure that I could see all the resources that were available with respect to transportation, I could select my transportation, hit submit. All of a sudden, the 100 some odd resources that are available here have now been filtered down to these 11 that are relevant to transportation. And again, I can read through some of these. So as a resource bank and library, the toolkit is, again, a very powerful tool, something that, really takes the PDF checklist to the next level, because this is that interactive forum and allows us to continue for us to continue to load resources in. And then the other piece to highlight here, as we look at taking this across the country, there is an English option, there's a French option, and some of the things that we learned, or one of the things that we learned in the pilot is over time there will be other groups specifically that we can target and adapt this tool for. So I'm going to take it back to our slides to just show, highlight a couple of key points. Make sure you're seeing the right screen. Oh, yeah, you should now see my slides. So why does all of this matter? Well, there's some really interesting things that we found in our pilot with the Canadian Ismaili community that, when these findings aren't specific to one community only. A lot of what you'll see on the slide and what I'll share is relevant to everybody, whether you're part of the Ismaili community or not. And one of the things that we found was that family members actually did this tool with their family and their loved ones. This wasn't just them doing it themselves, which in many ways is that reassurance that you're not doing this alone, and that you can have that plan and make sure that somebody else is aware of what your thoughts are and what your plan is. The other interesting fact that we came across in our pilot was that many of those who were over the age of 70 actually didn't have any conversations with their partners about their future plans. And so imagine being 70 or 71, 72, 80, and not having a plan in place that both partners or spouses are aware of, in the event that there's a medical, your medical circumstances change, or I should say your health circumstances change, or if anything happens, if as spouses there isn't that communication or planning, it can become a very challenging time for each of you. We also found that, I mentioned this before, there was the misconception or misperception that this tool was meant for those in their late 60s or 70s. And so even when this tool was launched for these Ismaili communities, for the Ismaili community, it was a large launch to the entire community, but some of the programming in which this was targeted through was in some of the programs that were for older adults, and many of them actually gave feedback to the Council for Canada, or the Aga Khan Council for Canada leadership, that this is a great tool, but it also in many ways feels a little bit too late for us to be completing a tool like this. Now, there's things to be said about when it's too late. I mean, a plan now is better than a plan never, and so some of these questions are still very important to ask and think through. But as we said earlier, this is one of those tools that we want to make sure everybody is doing from even their 40s and 50s and moving forward and revisiting, so that if circumstances change, your plan can change and adapt. But again, your family, your loved ones, your spouse all know what your plan is and what your wishes are. Before we close off and perhaps open it up for questions and further dialogue, I wanted to share some quick testimonials from the Canadian Ismaili community that went through our pilot and actually shared their thoughts. And I think there's a couple that I really wanted to highlight for the group here, because it speaks again to the importance of this tool, whether you're part of the pilot as the Canadian Ismaili community, or whether you're any older adult living in Canada. So one of the ones that really resonated with me was, it was thought-provoking and gave ideas on documenting some aspects for the power of attorney, and to discuss with family on assistance I may need in the future for care issues in case of incapacitated status. Now, as I said, some of these conversations are very difficult to have. I know as my parents age, I've signed, power of attorney and other documentation for them. And it's hard for them to say, can you come to the lawyer? Can you come to the notary public and sign this document? And I'm like, well, what document? And then they explain it to me. And it obviously becomes very uncomfortable and difficult to think about. But obviously imagine the alternative. And as this testimonial alludes, imagine not being able to have that conversation and being forced to make a decision that you don't even know is 100% what that individual's wishes are. So those uncomfortable conversations, as I said, are very important. The other piece that I wanted to highlight was the individual who said, all-encompassing when it comes to giving direction to prepare for old age eventualities. So the reality is all of us age, and this tool helps us helps us plan what exactly we should be thinking through and what questions we should be asking, what things we need in place as we age. And the last one I wanted to share was great tool. Need to get everyone over 40 to use it for themselves and their dependent parents. So again, another piece that speaks to that importance of this really being a tool for everybody, whether you are 40 or 50 or 60, 70 or 80, it's an important tool for all of us to use, and one, as we've mentioned, we'll continue to adapt and load more resources on. Just before I open it up for questions and maybe ask Anna to facilitate, Barb, was there any last points that you wanted to make about the toolkit itself?
No, just that as we've mentioned a couple of times, it's been really a pilot, and so the testing with the Amaanali community and getting the kind of feedback that Aman has just been sharing has been really helpful in terms of what kind of adjustments need to be made to it so that we can really optimize it and make it available more broadly in the very near future. And our hope is that other communities, whether they're faith communities or cultural communities, will be able to do more customizing and add specific resources that are unique and relevant to their communities. Other than that, you've covered it really well, Aman.
Great. Thank you, Barb, and thanks everybody for joining us. And so maybe we'll pass it back to you, Anna, to take us through the Q&A.
Thank you, Aman, and thank you, Barbara. Very, very interesting. Now I'm sure we'll have some questions. Linda just met someone today whose husband's health went downhill fast. There was no power of attorney in place. It was a nightmare in the middle of the stress she was dealing with. She's stressed to get power of attorney before it happened. So very good comment. Does anyone else have any questions or comments about the toolkit or any resources that Barbara and Aman mentioned? Brian says, thank you all for this. Wonderful. Any questions? And as I said before, the webinar is recorded, and Barbara and Aman will also share the slides, and we'll send the link to the website where you can do the go through this toolkit. So all of those resources will be available. Do we have any other questions? Please don't be shy. As I always say, there's no stupid question, no silly questions. Every question is good. So I don't know where to access the recording. I'm going to send an email to every participant of the webinar, as I do after every webinar. And in the email, there will be a link to the TB Vets YouTube channel. And all you do, you just click on the link and it takes you to our YouTube channel, and you will see the recording of this webinar and the previous ones if you missed them or if you want to watch them again. Real compliment to advanced care planning. Thank you. Thank you. Very informative. So a lot of positive comments, Aman and Barbara. Clearly, you know, your expertise is very important to us. Can this tool be shared with children for future reference? Aman? Aman? Sorry. Can this tool be shared with children for future reference? Bob Knight is asking.
Yeah, I think maybe Barb, in terms of I think we would, once the pilot is over, it would be public and available for all. Maybe, but Barb can probably give a more informed answer.
Yeah, I think not just children, but you know, neighbors and siblings, just a variety of people, because we often find ourselves in situations that it's not just about our parents, but there are many people who may not have children, but they've got other close family members or other people in the community. And I've seen this in just the last 4 years, you know, went along for a long time without much happening in this regard. And then over the last 4 years, I've had two neighbors, one who was 58, who came down with a terminal illness, and another one whose heart was giving out and only had a few days. And my father-in-law, my mother, I have a brother. And so, when you actually experience this, you really start thinking about who's involved, who should be involved, and what their role is. And so I think, it's something that we think should be shared quite broadly when it becomes, when we finish our reports to government, and it becomes more readily available, which hopefully will be early in the new year.
Thank you. Sandra is asking, how can we give feedback or suggestions or participate in the pilot?
I think it's too late to participate in the pilot, but certainly feedback or suggestions from what you've seen today, you can just email Aman, whose email address is, help me, Aman, AMAA.
I will share it. Don't worry, Barbara. I will share it when I send all the information to the participants. It's easier if it's written down.
There you go. And it's in the chat box right now.
Yeah. Okay. There's a comment from Linda saying, appreciate that someone as young as Aman is passionate about this and is willing to work with this cause. So thank you, and looks like an excellent tool for planning and being proactive about our future. Gordon is asking, when the report is fully released, the report about the toolkit, will TB Vets circulate the new link? Will there be a new link, Barbara, or will it be the same link?
Yeah, we will have it posted on in our newsletter, and we can be in touch with you, Anna, so that you can
share with. Yeah, no, that sounds great. That sounds very good. And Connie wants to know if this is available in a print copy. Not all seniors can access the internet.
It can be downloaded. It's not something that will be printed and distributed unless an organization wants to do that. There might be a seniors organization or some other community organization that does print off copies and make them available. But the plan is that it's online. People can complete it online, but they can also download and print it. Aman, did you have anything to add on that part?
No, just that it is available in PDF format. Again, recognizing that not all seniors can access the internet, there is additional value in completing the tool online because it links to the resources, and so that may even be an opportunity to complete it with a family member who does have access to the internet. But it is available as a PDF to download and print as well.
Thank you. How do you plan to launch this great tool? Question from Sandra.
Well, we haven't decided that just yet, but when we do, we'll certainly let Anna know and she can share that. But yeah, that will be something for the new year, yeah. But we're really excited about making it available more broadly.
Well, that'll be great because we have a newsletter that we share with all of our donors, not only the webinar participants, but everybody, and a lot of our donors are of this age group. So it will be very nice to share this resource that will be more widely available. That's great. Thank you. Do we have any more questions? Or I think this is probably it. Thank you very much, both Barbara and Aman. Really appreciate you sharing your expertise on this very important topic. And thank you everyone for joining us.